Hello all and welcome to our weekly series here at fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. We bring the very latest Premier League injury news and predicted lineups courtesy of the main man, injury analyst Ben Dinnery. I'm standing in for James again this week, who is on his final day of holiday. Ben, great to see you again. How's your week been? I bet your DMs absolutely exploded at around, what was it, about 8:30 on Wednesday evening?
Oh, mate, it's another day in paradise. I was actually recording a podcast on Wednesday, so I was totally oblivious
Oh, no way.
to the goings on down at Stamford Bridge. We finished around about 8:45, flicked it on, and that was it. It was absolute carnage, and has been ever since. But the silver lining on the cloud, it makes our captaincy choices a little bit easier this week. I think we're gravitating maybe towards Mo Salah in that big Northwest derby on Sunday. Lukaku, Norwich, Tuchel playing him, muscle fatigue, all of that's gone now, so we don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to take all the positives. It's a new me. I'm moving forward. I'm looking on the bright side.
Well, it's actually forced me, Ben. I was saving a transfer this week. Well, I say it's forced me. It probably says more about me than anything else. But I was gone from saving a transfer from that injury to actually wildcarding this week. So if you are watching, you are interested, I'll be putting a wildcard video out a little bit later this afternoon. And we'll also be doing a deadline stream at 5:30 p.m. as well, if you are interested. But yeah, I just thought, looking at HAVERTZ for the next three, I'm sure we'll touch, on Chelsea now. Obviously, I just wonder whether there's, a really good opportunity to kind of jump in and make some serious points before setting our teams up. Anyway, enough about my wildcard. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen and set the alerts so you don't miss any of our brilliant Fantasy Premier League content or live streams right here on this channel. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. Apologies for my unkempt appearance this morning. I was up till about 2:30 this morning on a Twitter Spaces chatting wildcards and transfers and everything else before the price changes. So a bit of a mess this morning. Anyway, let's get into it. And starting with the Gunners, Ben, do we have any interesting news from the Emirates?
The only confirmed absentee will be Granit Xhaka. There are concerns over Bukayo Saka, who was on the receiving end of a rather industrial Monday night. That forced him off with a calf injury. And also Kieran Tierney picked up a knock, although there was no specific mention from Mikel Arteta. What we do know, both players trained on Thursday. Yeah. Obviously, that's a big positive. However, we don't trust those training ground pictures solely. They've had, got through that session, maybe, didn't suffer any kind of overnight reaction. But like I say, it's a positive. The only question that I've got maybe with regards to this starting 11 that I've predicted here is the absence of Alexander Lacazette and, of course, his impact from the bench.
He's
on
fantastic
Monday.
Last week, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at, where he could maybe come in to that team. But for the moment, I've went with, more or less the same starting lineup. But like I say, Lacazette won't be far away from Mikel Arteta's thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for that. Let's move on to Aston Villa, and a very familiar looking team at the moment, but you have gone for Buendia. Interesting. You think he starts this week?
I do, yes. I mean, he hasn't been pulling up trees since his arrival at Villa Park. He came in last week and with Ramsey sort of dropping out, and Villa were okay for 80 minutes. For the large part, they performed quite well. And I expected a similar type of lineup this week, although the treatment room has cleared. Dean Smith can count on the likes of Leon Bailey, which is a huge boost, and also Bertrand Traore. But given the fact that they've been suffering muscle injuries, thigh and hamstring respectively, for the last 4 to 5 weeks, it's highly unlikely that either of those players will be thrown straight back in. I would imagine a gradual integration, building up those minutes, protecting those players, with maybe a start, potentially game week 10, maybe game week 11.
Good, thank you so much. And on to Brentford. I'm particularly interested in this one because at the moment I'm on triple Brentford in my wild card. Warrior, what's going on at Brentford?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talking about the triple up with the bees, and it's so I'm presuming you've maybe went for Tony Mbeumo, and I'm going to say Pinnock.
I haven't. I've actually gone I've gone for Raya because I just think he's a fabulous keeper. But looking at some stats this week, Brentford have got the second best expected goals conceded so far all season, just behind Man City. They look absolutely brilliant. So I had Sanchez in goal. So yeah, I've gone for Raya, but I do think that both Pinnock and Jansen are incredible value.
Yeah. I mean, in the news from the from Brentford is great. We've heard from Thomas Frank. Basically, it's as you were. Long-term absentees remain. Mad Sorensen, Shannon Baptiste with a dislocated shoulder, the latest being that player there. But yeah, look, I think despite that 1-0 defeat at Chelsea, they were extremely unlucky. They caught Benjamin Mendy on just one of those days. I think his XG prevented was a full goal in that game. That shows you how good he was. So I think the Bees will be unchanged for this weekend. And heading prior to last week, I know Brentford were top 7 in the Premier League for both their attacking metrics and their defensive metrics. And that's even coming off, the back of some really difficult fixtures. So doing a fantastic job this season.
They are. They've been absolutely superb. On to Brighton, Hove Albion. Obviously, you've got the unenviable task of facing Manchester City this week. What's the news there?
Yeah, there's 2, potential returners that people may be interested in, Adam Webster and Tariq Lamptey. However, from Graham Potter's comments and read between the lines, it looks like Tariq Lamptey will still be managed, given the fact that it's been 10, 11 months, I think, since he's any regular competitive minutes. So Veltman looks certainly locked in there for the moment. And Adam Webster, he returned to the training pitches this week, and he only has an outside chance of returning to the squad. So hopefully we'll see Duffy, Dunk and Bird in that back line with Veltman. And Cucurella I have on the left as well, but Potter has also been talking up Solly Marsh, who's back from his hamstring injury, and he won't be far away from coming into that starting 11. But Cucurella gets it, based on his performances in the early part of this season for me.
Superb. Take a look at Burnley this week. Can't get very excited about Burnley, but you have got Cornet playing high up the pitch this week.
Yeah, I think Burnley just, they need goals. That's where they're struggling, and he offers something a little bit different. And when you look at maybe who Chris Wood, predominantly who started, he's played alongside Matai Vidra, Ashley Barnes and Jay Rodriguez, they haven't really hit the ground running yet in the Premier League, whereas Cornet looks to bring something a little bit different. He has that electrifying pace to be able to break through the lanes. So I think he gets a nod. The back line, I've also included Ben Mee. Now, Nathan Collins may feel a little bit unfortunate if he does drop out. Ben Mee missed out with an ankle problem and recently COVID as well. And Nathan Collins has done a great job, but I just think, that experience and that solid backline with the addition of also Charlie Taylor back in there, I think, Sean Dyche reverts to, that more solid foundation that we're more used to seeing.
Agreed. Superb. And on to the all-important one, the Chelsea lineup, which we're all incredibly interested in after the news in the week.
Yeah, I suppose a surprise omission, and I have thought about give this some serious thought, is the absence of Reece James. Of course, he's missing from the right-hand side, and he does hold a lot of appeal for fantasy managers. And this really could go either way, because Thomas Tuchel does have the flexibility to be able to change up that back line, drop Christensen, drop and put Azpilicueta in there, put James on the right. But I just thought the fact that Azpilicueta came off, during the weekend, and James just had that short run out, I thought that was maybe an indication that he may just plumb fast Azpilicueta on the right, and I do like Christensen in that back line with Silva and Rudiger. But yes, look, just be wary of it. And of course, the big talking points, the absence of Lukaku and Werner. With either, I'd be very surprised if they return before the international break. Of course, we'll hear from Tuchel this afternoon. Werner looks to be a little bit more serious than Lukaku. So the benefactors for that, Hudson-Odoi certainly comes into contention again after impressing from the bench. And Kai Havertz, player I think that you brought in on your wild card that you could maybe expect to really, make hay while the sun shines over the coming game weeks. Although I am expecting, maybe I'm expecting a tighter game than anybody else thinks against Norwich.
I do agree with that, yeah.
They're off the back of consecutive clean sheets. Yeah. They've went to a back five. And of course, I think Chelsea will win, but I don't think it will be the cakewalk maybe that everybody's expecting. I'm certainly not thinking 4 or 5. I'm thinking more likely 2.
Yeah, no, I do. I do agree with that. Just finally on Chilwell versus Alonso. So obviously Chilwell played 60 in the week, which, depending on what narrative you want to spin, you can say that, that means Alonso's going to start on the weekend, or it could mean brought off early, to actually start on the weekend. It's clear now that he's first choice. Do you think there's any kind of risk of him not playing this weekend, obviously with the Carabao in midweek?
I think there's always a risk with Thomas Tuchel,
Okay.
and that's just he's the new Pep, as it were, or the new Ranieri, or the old Ranieri.
Yeah.
But initially, I thought Ben Chilwell has always been first choice, but his involvement in the Euros with the squad, and he actually probably returned from England duty, even though he had been trained, but he didn't have any competitive minutes, fairly deconditioned in terms of his fitness. He missed a chunk of that pre-season program, so he's been playing catch-up from day one, and we know Thomas Tuchel is a stickler for making sure that his players are right and on it, and he wants to minimise any risk of injury incidents. So now that Chilwell is, fighting fit, I expect him to hold down that place. I think if there were any doubts, it would just be a case of maybe flip-flopping between the two for those 90 minutes. This way, Chilwell gets his run out. Alonso can, maintain those sort of base levels. He keeps his involvement, but Chilwell starts and Alonso gets the nod in the Carabao Cup for me.
Thank you, Ben. And on to Crystal Palace, who had an inspired performance against Arsenal on Monday night. Olise started on the bench on Monday. You've got him to start this week?
I have, and I actually had him to start against Arsenal, as it happens. I think he's been very impressive following his introduction. Of course, that would mean Jordan Ayew dropping out the team, and he brings a different dynamic to the Eagles. Very workmanlike, very high press, always playing on the front foot. But Olise just adds that little bit of guile and that craft and that little bit of class and quality to that attack. And of course, I've got Wilfried Zaha back in the team, and he's a talisman for Palace. He missed the Arsenal game. That resulted in a slight change of formation from Patrick Vieira. They went to a 4-2-3-1 with Benteke leading that line, and Edwards sort of dropping in on the left-hand side. So again, I give this a little bit of thought as well. And the part of the old Ben would have went, you don't change your winning team and you stick with that 4-2-3-1. But I just think because it's Zaha, he has to come back. Benteke has scored, but I think his minutes will be managed, and I'm just drawn towards Olise because he's, there's so much talk about the player who's made this step up, and the early signs are that if he can kick on and be anything like Eze and make that impact, then they've got another great signing on their hands.
They've got a very, very exciting attack there, haven't they? With those three, and Gallagher kind of in behind as well, who's also having a great season. I wouldn't be surprised for Palace to really do something special this season, hopefully.
Look, it looks like they've got a really bright future after, it's a major overhaul in the summer. And I've been surprised, quietly confident that Palace can go on and actually do something this season.
On to the Toffees, and still no Calvert-Lewin, still no Richarlison. What's the news?
So we heard this week that Calvert-Lewin's actually suffered a setback. And that setback's likely to mean that we probably won't see him before the international break. So that's a big blow. With regards to Richarlison, the news is slightly better. He was close last weekend, so I would expect him maybe to be in and around the matchday squad this week. However, given the amount of time that he's actually spent on the sidelines, I can't see Rafa Benitez risking him from the start, despite their obvious lack of guile and creative edge up front. They struggled against West Ham to break them down, and maybe Rondon isn't 100% in terms of his sharpness and fitness. And also we lost Abdul Doucouré as well following that game with West Ham. Massive. And I'm glad I found that one earlier in the week because he would have been one of my transfers in. I've been delaying that one and regretting those decisions. So we don't quite know how the team will set up. Gaberman looks to be a good fit, or possibly Andre Gomez, but both players have had their own, respective injury concerns in recent times, and whether they're, 100% match ready, I'm not quite sure, but I've went for Gaberman for now.
Superb, thank you, mate. On to Leeds, and who are struggling, aren't they, at the moment, to really create anything, but you've got Rafinha back in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got him actually playing in that number 10 role, which I understand maybe that he hasn't been sort of deployed there at any point in his Leeds career. But this goes back to comments when Leeds signed Dan James and about, the two wide men were Harrison and James Flynn and Rafira being, more centrally. So this is probably the first opportunity where Marcelo Bielsa's had a fit Harrison, fully fit following his COVID, and then Dan James, since his arrivals, need to get up to speed. So I've took a little bit of a gamble based on that, hoping that that's the way Marcelo Bielsa will go. Otherwise, it could be that we may be looking at Roberts centrally and Rafinha back out on the right. But yeah, look, he's absolutely fine. It was his late return from international duty last week, and he was right to leave the Brazilian on out of the match day squad because it was too much of a risk.
Any news on a Bamford return at all?
This one seems to be ongoing. The player himself was confident of a return during the international break. So whether there's been a slight setback or maybe he isn't responding to conservative treatment as he initially hoped, we don't know. All we know is he definitely won't feature this weekend or in the Carabao Cup. He hasn't been ruled out of game week 10 as it currently stands. It's one of those ones where we're sort of assessing game week to game week, and we'll see how it is. But again, knowing Bielsa and how his management style, he's a player that won't be risked, unnecessarily. We've seen that with Calvin Phillips, back on the training pitches, fit, healthy, but he said he just hasn't got the amount of training time in his legs to justify the performance, and therefore he won't be included.
Superb. And on to Leicester City after their incredible European win midweek, and you haven't got 4-goal striker Daka in your lineup. I think it's right to be fair.
Look, again, a one that I can, give it some serious contemplation, and I can flip flop. Vardy starts, so there you go. So it's between Iheanacho and Vardy. I just look at last weekend's result against Manchester United and think, probably or arguably the best performance of the season so far. Certainly from an attacking perspective, and based on that, Kelechi does get the nod. I have omitted Yuri Tielemans from this starting lineup, and that relates to a calf problem that he picked up in Moscow. And we're waiting for an update from Brendan Rodgers. But again, at the time of writing, I'm weighing up the pros and cons, and I'm thinking about a muscle injury and the quick turnaround between games. And, it would be a struggle unless, like I say, it was more of a precautionary, just a little bit of tightness, then he has a chance. But, we'll see, and we'll hear from Rodgers, and we'll update if he provides a kind of positive spin on that little on that niggle that Tielemans picked up.
Fantastic, thank you, Ben. And on to Liverpool. I was a Jota owner last week, absolutely devastated. He's had such hard luck these last few weeks, Jota, and obviously Firmino comes in for him, bangs a hat-trick of tap-ins in. Is there any other news from Anfield?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much as you were, in all honesty. I mean, people asking about Thiago Alcantara. It doesn't look that he's going to return anytime soon. And also we've seen Curtis Jones train ahead of the Champions League tie in Madrid. He was involved in Leipzig, but he remained on Merseyside, to build up a little bit of fitness. So he should be in and around the squad. But does he threaten Navigator's place? I'm not sure. I'm going to go with this starting 11 for this, with Jones coming in for a place on the bench.
Superb. And on to Manchester City. Predict Pep, the easiest thing in the world to do. What's the... In all fairness, I think it's been a lot more settled this season than previous season. You can normally get kind of 8 or 9, I think, rather than the 5 or 6.
Yeah, I mean, he'll go. He has went sort of 3, 4, 5 games with a fairly rigid, solid starting 11, and then he just throws in the odd curveball where he makes it, a good few changes, and it knocks your fantasy plans out the window. There's so much strength and depth, and of course they had that great midweek performance in the Champions League, included the likes of Nathan Ake. We've seen John Stones come back in recent games. So that it causes a little bit of a logistical headache in that backline. But for me, this is probably one of the the strongest lineup that he can go with. but you still have the likes of Mahrez and Sterling, all beating down that door. And Gundogan isn't even in there as well. So, look, if it was this starting 11, you wouldn't be surprised. If Pep turned around and made 5 or 6 changes from this, then again, you just have to hold your hands up and go, well, that's the nature of the beast when you're trying to consider City assets.
Yeah, definitely. And on to Man United. Noticed Rashford, obviously, he looks very, very fresh. I'm assuming there's a bit of a toss-up between Sancho and Rashford for your starting 11.
Yeah, I'm just again. I'm thinking of the bigger picture. Of course, Rashford made his first start following shoulder surgery in the Champions League, so it's a relatively quick turnaround. I mean, there is ample amount of recovery, but he also picked up a knock in that game, a heavy knock on his thigh, which was a dead leg. So there are no guarantees at this moment that Rashford will actually be fit, although the early news is positive. So that's why I did opt for Sancho. There's also stories circulating that Bruno may be a slight doubt. So that's one for the community to keep an eye on. There's no official confirmation from the club. This stems from a training session. I think it was at Carrington on Thursday. He took part in a warm-up, but he sat out of the main group session. Now, look, I don't want to read too much into that because there could be numerous reasons as to why that may have been the case. And maybe the publication that did release the stories does have a history of maybe embellishing on certain. So look, it treated with kid goods, but what I'm saying is there's a heads up there.
Yeah.
Just be aware of it. The other one I've got is Pogba sitting alongside McTominay after Fred for like an apparent hamstring injury.
Okay. And on to your team, Newcastle, who, I mean, what a buzz last week. Ben, obviously they didn't get the result. That early goal must have been absolutely incredible. But obviously, still issues in terms of quality and winning matches. And obviously, Steve Bruce gone in the week. It's all happening up your way.
Yeah, mate. Look, I think we had the conversation. I was confident of a Newcastle win. I really, really was. And after that goal, I just thought that was it. The stars have aligned, and maybe I was guilty of getting caught up in the occasion and everything. Because ultimately, regardless of what was happening off the pitch, it was the same players on the pitch, and we allowed Tottenham to get back into the game. We allowed them to come on the front foot, and they were deserved victors on the day. We were poor defensively. That's always going to be the concern for us. Now Graham Jones has took over. He would have had a heavy influence on team selection and setup anyway. Under Steve Bruce. So will we see massive changes? I'm not so sure. I think it's very much a long-term project with the new owners. Stabilize, stay in the Premier League, bring in 2 or 3 players in January. But for the moment, we're going to have to really stick with what we've got because we haven't really got much choice in there. The questions, you could potentially be looking at maybe Martin Dubravka over Carl Darlow, if anybody's over in him. I've also brought Mikel Almiron back into the side, and that would be Longstaff making way for that. But other than that, really, I mean, you're talking about maybe Joe Linton coming in, but for who? So it's difficult. I've plumbed for this team, but Graham Jones, he might surprise everyone, and he might just adopt a whole new, different footballing philosophy and throw a couple of curveballs in there for it.
I gotta be fair. I think well, I use the term fortunate. I don't mean fortunate, but to have Wilson and St. Maximin, who would I think it's probably fair to say probably grace any Premier League team. I think you've always got a chance with those players on the pitch, haven't you, of something, because they are absolutely fantastic players.
Yeah, we just need to keep Wilson fit. I mean, look, he got that early goal last week, and he sort of disappeared. I questioned at the time, should he actually start?
Maybe it was just a fitness thing, wasn't it, more than anything?
Yeah, he had missed a lot of time, so but yeah, Wilson is quality, and we all know what Sam Maxim brings to the party.
On to the Canaries, Norwich, and I thought they were unlucky last week. They had so many chances, and they just they couldn't put him in. Sargent in particular had the open goal chance, and a couple of others as well. And I agree with your assessment of the game was going to, happen this week at Chelsea. I think obviously Chelsea win, but I certainly can't see a 4 or 5-0. What's the news from the team?
Yeah, not much. I think Falkland name's an unchanged team. We've seen a shift in recent weeks from a 4-3-3 to this 5-3-2. Yeah. A lot more solid at the back. They're not getting the goals up front, but as long as we're not leaking a lot, then we've got a foundation to build on. I'm hoping Sargent, I do actually have him in other formats, and I was a little bit gutted he didn't get on the score sheet. So he was my sort of differential punt.
Differential, Christ.
Yeah. People may be asking about Giannoulis over Williams, but he's justified his place on the left in recent weeks. So therefore, like I say, I can't see Daniel Farke messing around with this team too much. Billy Gilmore, obviously, he misses out against his parent club. Although, in truth, he has struggled in recent weeks to get any game time at all.
On to the Saints, Southampton, and it was a bit of a surprise last week, I think, that Brocha started ahead of Armstrong, but fully justified in the end.
Yeah, he got the goal, they got the win. So, Ralph Hasenhüttl can tell everybody, well, I made the right decision and I made a good call on that. We did hear from Hasenhüttl on Thursday, and he talked specifically about Adam Armstrong, and he said, he's got a really bright future at the club. He talked about how when he arrived, his performances were really good. He's shown on the training pitches that he can he can finish his conversion rate, that there isn't an issue there. But as always, when you make that transition from second tier into the Premier League, once that wave of enthusiasm goes, maybe your form does dip a little bit. And Broja he's been waiting on the wings. He has impressed from the bench and deserved that chance and took that opportunity. After a great result, really, if not the performance, certainly for the neutral to watch. But the win, the first win of the season, I think they're fairly strong. And I did have Perot over Walker Peters is another one which I sort of tied and struggled with. But I'm looking at last week's game and thinking clean sheeting and sticking with that for now.
I don't envy you picking these teams with all these 50-50s every single week. It's so tough for you. On to Spurs, as we said, beat Newcastle last week. Kane and Son are looking very popular in fantasy circles. Kane in particular is 5% owned in FPL. What's the news from the lane?
Yeah, we've seen 11 changes in the Europa Conference League game on Thursday night from Tottenham. So I think that gives a strong indication from Nuno how he sees his side for this weekend. Again, whether it was, I'm not so convinced that Tottenham have actually turned a corner despite back-to-back wins.
Same.
I think we need to take the opposition into consideration and look for context there. But there was positives to take from that game. Certainly at Newcastle, I thought Ndombele looked good. And of course, is this a re-emergence or the return of the real Harry Kane? Is he going to stand up? Time will tell. So I think this is an opportunity again for those players to go out and, hopefully for your boys, make it 3 on the spin.
Defence, just looking at the defence, just fills me with dread. It's a very obviously new looking defence. I think Skip has played fantastically well actually, but yeah, defence worries me. I'm sure we'll settle down. Emerson and Romero will settle down and settle in, but every time a team goes forward, I just go. I wouldn't be surprised to see a high scoring game at West Ham. Think like a 2-2 or a 3-2 to West Ham or something potentially this week.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've seen Emerson. I'm just absolutely, I'm not convinced. And I think Tanganga would be the choice for me. Although, I still like Matt Dougherty. I don't really know why he has dropped off the face of it, although I know he's carrying an injury at the moment, but he isn't getting a look in.
No.
And I really liked him at Wolves, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to fit with Nuno's plans. We see him dropped at Wolves, and of course that's happened at Tottenham. So, yeah, Emerson's shirt for now.
On to the W's, and Watford obviously got absolutely pumped against Liverpool last week. Do you expect any changes in the lineup this week?
There could be. I think it's Claudio Ranieri's first real week in charge although he did get them that chance to meet the players and had a couple of sessions. Just picking up things from Thursday's press conference, because we've seen Ismail Sarr deployed in a more central role against Liverpool, and Watford were absolutely atrocious. Probably one of the worst performances I've witnessed with my own eyes this season. They were outfought, outbattled, particularly for a team playing under their new boss. But Claudio Ranieri said, look, Sarr, his preferred position, the position he looks best in, is on the right-hand side. And the return of Josh King will allow him to move out wide and hopefully, King comes up against his former employers. Elsewhere, the right-back spot with Firmino, we know that he picked up a knock against Liverpool. He's been having treatment all week. So again, that's a 50-50 call, but he hadn't trained with the group. So that's why I've went with Ngagia in that backline. But Watford also missing the likes of Siralta and Kabasele. So defensively, it's going to struggle. Danny Rose, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he come up.
We're doing that for far too long.
Yeah, he's come up against, for me, the best player in the world, certainly at this point in Mo Salah, and he got absolutely ripped a new one. Look, we'll see if he can reset and recalibrate and make amends with a decent performance this weekend. Otherwise, he's very much on that slippery slope.
I think he is, you're right. And on to West Ham, who faced this dodgy Spurs defence this week. A few changes last night, I noticed, in the Europa League. What do you expect for this week?
Yeah, I mean, the absence of Antonio was key. Had a lot of questions about that. Just to put people's mind at rest, it was absolutely a tactical, precautionary decision from David Moyes, protecting his striker. He spoke about, look, we've seen this as an opportunity to prepare Antonio for Sunday. So that's great news in that regard. I do have Soufal, of course, in at right back. He has been missing games in recent weeks. He had an injection in a problematic pelvic issue that was hoping to ease the issue there. If he responds well, then he should be in and around that starting 11. If not, it could be Johnson. But we also see the return of Ryan Fredericks to the matchday squad on Thursday evening. So David Moyes does have options for that right back spot, but otherwise it's pretty much as you were for the Hammers.
Fantastic. And finally then, on to Wolves. Trying to predict their forward line is quite tough. It seems to change every week. What's the news at Molyneux?
Yeah, a great come from behind victory last weekend. It just shows, you should never give up. Jimenez was absent from the starting 11 following his late return from Mexico. Yeah. I've thrown him back in. His form has been sensational, really. I mean, early season form, he was more. Underlying data was great. It give some kind of hint that he was performing, although from a fantasy perspective, we weren't reaping the rewards. Now he seems to be doing that. Again, he scored for Mexico. So, yeah, he comes back in. And I've went for Traore, who had been out of favour in recent weeks, but performed well last week. And then Hee-chan, who really has hit the ground running since his arrival. Podence is the player to miss out for me. Trincao, he's coming off the back of COVID. He could potentially disrupt some of that front three, but just for this week, I think it's just a little bit too soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben. And just to remind everyone, it is currently 10:52 a.m. with what we're recording here, so there may be news this afternoon, but don't forget the article which is just shown on screen will be fully updated by Ben personally, fully top of the day for Hub members at fantasyfootballhub.co.uk using the top link in the description below if you do want to follow all the latest and greatest information. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining me this week again.
Absolute
and
pleasure.
James is back next week, so it may be a while before we meet again, but it's always a pleasure.
Tear in the eye.
I know, I can see.
But it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all.
Absolutely, love that, mate. Make sure you drop Ben a follow on Twitter if you don't already, at Ben Dinnery. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button. It would be much appreciated. I remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. My handle as well, if you want to follow me for FPL and fantasy football content, is at FFH_Fergie. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof. including the player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta stats, top player team reveals, point predictions tools, and much, much more. To join the tens of thousands of other managers and sign up to the Hub to use all our amazing resources, just click in the link in the description below. We'll be back next week with the lineups and team news ahead of Game Week 10. Goodbye for now.